Welcome to TYT Sports. It's football time. Michael Shore here with Jason Rubin. Also, we are joined, Jason, from New Orleans, from Slidell, the Algiers Slidell area of Louisiana, by Josh Gibbs. Josh, a participant in our TYT Fantasy Football League. Josh, who did you beat?
Well, the list of people that the White Welkers have been dominating is too numerous to list. However, I think Cenk Uygur just barely pulled out a win against me recently. However, he and I will be having a rematch very shortly.
Yeah, it's a rematch that the entire football world is waiting for. You are in the center of Saints territory there, Josh. I think everybody in football is trying to figure out what the heck is going on with the Saints. They can't win on the road. They're unbeatable at home. What gives with that, and what do you see happening this week?
Well, this week the Saints just need to return to the dominating defense they had last year. I mean, their pass rush was their key to success. Is that the stifling defense that they could bring and the pressure their secondary can provide is exactly what led them to success last year and in years before with Sean Payton. People like to look at history and see how well the Saints have done, but it's clear that this isn't the same Saints team with Jimmy Graham being held to very few yards per game, especially, which is very uncharacteristic of him. The loss of Darren Sproles is really being felt now on the offensive side of the ball, but defense wins championships.
Defense does win championships, but they're a team that has relied, Jason, on their offense. Josh made mention of the fact that Jimmy Graham has been kind of invisible. Not really sure what their running game is. They have injuries there, but Kyrie Robinson coming up playing pretty well. They have never figured out how to use Pierre Thomas. They just know now that he's not Darren Sproles. What do you think the problem is?
Again, Mark Ingram's injured, and he's going to be dealing with injuries, hopefully not throughout the rest of the year, because they're going to need a run game somewhere in there, but give the ball to Drew Brees more. I mean, let him not give the ball to Drew Brees, but let him take over the game more. They narrowly escaped Minnesota, and I say narrowly, this is 2 weeks ago at home, for the reason that a lot of people were expecting 41 points, 35 points out of the Saints in that game, and I think they put up 20. So unbeatable at home now doesn't seem so unbeatable, and that was Minnesota before Teddy Bridgewater even came into the equation. That's a whole other dynamic of player that's joining that team. So with the Saints, Drew Brees is a monster of a quarterback. He can throw the ball downfield, and he should be throwing it downfield more to Jimmy Graham.
But Jason makes a good point, Josh. He's saying that Drew Brees needs to throw the ball downfield more. He needs to spread out. They have to use him as their number one weapon. When he was really at his most effective, he had a huge cast there. He had people catching balls. Oh yeah, Devery Henderson's still on the Saints. Oh yeah, Lance Moore's still on the Saints. Those people are gone. Has anybody come in to replace those kind of names so that he can spread the ball out the way he liked to do when he was having his best years?
Well, the problem that the Saints are having is that they went all in on a guy named Jarvis Byrd, who is a safety who they picked up for $54 million. And in order to make that cap space, they cut guys that you mentioned. You have guys, Darren Sproles is gone, Malcolm Jenkins is gone, Lance Moore is gone, Brian De La Puente, Roman Harper. They got rid of all of those guys just to make room for one key position that they weren't even weak at. So I think, and history tells us that teams that start out, as the Saints have, miss the playoffs 84% of the time. So history is not on the Saints' side, but that's not to say that they still can't bounce back, because they do still have all these offensive weapons. And like you mentioned, giving the ball to Drew Brees, a first-round Hall of Fame quarterback, whenever he does decide to retire, that's definitely going to be one of their keys to victory, and especially when the relationship that he and Sean Payton have, we know that is inevitable, allowing him to spread the ball more. The success they found in their lone victory so far was short passes. It was not deep passes. So I expect to see some more of that, especially utilizing the best tight end in the league and a high draft pick in all fantasy football leagues if you were lucky to get him in Jimmy Graham.
That's probably true. When, as you're watching this team, what about his protection? A new old center in front of him. That line, as you mentioned, shaken up a little bit. What have you noticed that he's having less time, and that has caused him to not have as much of a free range with the targets that he is accustomed to having?
Absolutely. He's certainly not getting the protection that he needs. But I think what we can't ignore is the fact that in their two losses, or in two of their three losses, with the exception of the Dallas game, those weren't blowouts. I mean, they lost to Atlanta in overtime by a field goal, and Matt Ryan went completely ham and threw for, 446 yards, I think it was, and then they lose to Cleveland by 2 points. So really, this team's the record, I think, is a little dismissive, and it certainly is not indicative of how bad this team is, whereas some people look at the record and think that the Saints have completely lost their way. But we also need to remember it is still early in the season, and I think it would be somewhat irresponsible to completely write the Saints off this early, and that the same goes for any team.
I don't think anyone is going to write the Saints off with these names. Jason, one of the great things that a struggling football team can face is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So they play them this weekend. What do you see happening there? Tampa Bay coming off a surprise win in Pittsburgh. I don't think they're going to do that in New Orleans.
It's a big win in Pittsburgh, but going into New Orleans, who needs to make a bunch of changes going forward with this team, I think it will be close, but not that close. The touchdown will separate the two teams. The Saints will come out on top. At least that's the prediction I'm going to go with. But again, I'm going to go back to a different point, at least with the Saints. And like, defense wins championships, yes, that's true. So does offensive lines. Yeah. They win championships, and good offensive lines are a staple to a team, and they need to get the chemistry back together. You have Rob Ryan on the hot seat. At least those are the headlines that are going around. I think the defense will eventually come around this season. But like you just said, a team, what do the great teams do? They bounce back. They're 1-3. Their record doesn't reflect. The Browns are an underrated team. And Drew Brees, and I think the press conference after that game was, he said, I can attribute those losses to 2 specific plays. But Josh, I wanted to ask you, are fans in New Orleans, are they panicking? Are they in panic mode that a team that was kind of expected to come out 3-1 is the opposite of 1-3?
I've lived in a lot of places around the world. I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Florida, I've lived in San Diego, I've lived in Japan, and I've lived in Virginia, all these places that have really seasoned sports teams, and I have never lived in a city that loved and stuck to its football teams more than New Orleans. The Who Dat Nation, I mean, this team could go 0-16, and the Who Dat Nation would say, hey, we still got a chance at a wild card. They still hold out hope no matter what goes on. And I know a lot of that plays into the resiliency of the city after Hurricane Katrina and the subsequent Super Bowl victory that came shortly thereafter. But this city is fiercely loyal to the Saints. It's black and gold everywhere. Nobody in this city is panicking.
It's not like when the Cebu Lions got off to that 12-14 stretch and everybody thought they were going to win the Japanese World Series, right? I mean, let's be serious here.
Completely from that.
Well, and sort of continue the New Orleans home thing. Why can't this team win on the road? What is that problem? And that's not just this season. Drew Brees has always struggled. Let's put it. I mean, he's still one of the top quarterbacks. He still wins on the road, but he's had a different time on the road, and the split is a lot different for him than it is for other great quarterbacks. Why do you think that is?
It's a lack of resiliency for defense and special teams. I mean, their turnover margin is abysmal on the road for some reason, and if you can't corral your defense and special teams, then the offense, no matter what they try to do, they can't do anything. They can't get anything going early, and that's their problem. We saw a little bit of a surge towards the end of the Dallas game, but it just simply wasn't enough. They had dug themselves too deep into a hole. And if your defense and special teams puts you in that hole, then it doesn't matter who's sitting behind the center. It's going to be more difficult to come back from that.
I also think they're playing against teams that are partied all to hell from being in New Orleans and going to Tipitinas and Pat O'Brien's and things. So I think that there's that. It's the opponents, when they're at home, are just hammered. That's what it is.
Yeah, we need to bring some of the mobile daiquiri trucks with us on the road, and then I think we'd have a better shot.
Now you're talking. Now we're hearing that Josh Gibbs is serious about his football analysis.
Very true. All right, Josh, thank you so much for coming on. As always, we look forward to having you on for any Saints news and information moving forward, and good luck in the rest of the TYT Fantasy League. Josh, I just need one more thing out of you, and that is if you can just reiterate who is in first place in the TYT Fantasy League.
I've taken a lot of shots to the head over the years, and I don't really remember. I think it's me, and so I'm going to go with that.
Right. And you know what? Like the Saints, if you're 1-3 in the TYT Fantasy Football League, that doesn't matter either. And so that if you're in first, it doesn't matter. So we'll see who's in first later.
It's still early in both seasons to tell.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. And it's a partnership, so we know that Jason had nothing to do with it, even if he happens to be in.